Right, so the city of Rafah is essentially the last stand of the people of Gaza. They've been driven south gradually over the last 4 months since October 7th. They were told the south is safe. This is where they should go by Israel. Only for Israel to consistently move southwards in their bid to eliminate Hamas, not caring how many civilians they take out alongside that, as a 30,000 person death toll attests to, and including their own hostages as accusations from their families aimed at the Netanyahu regime will attest to as well. Well, Rafah is as far south as they can go. It's where the Gaza Strip meets the border with Egypt, and with nowhere to run, Israel are now targeting Rafah too. We should have assumed they would. They haven't spared anywhere or anyone, and that comes into crystal clarity with the reports overnight of exactly what kind of structures they've been targeting, all of course in blatant violation of the orders laid down by the International Court of Justice. Right, so Rafah, the southern city in Gaza where the Strip meets Egypt and where the border crossing between the two states is. As things stand, 1.9 million people are now huddled up in that one city, and Israel are still striking it. The potential for the death toll we've already seen in Gaza up until now to soar to unimaginable and horrible levels should right now be obvious, because there is no longer anywhere for these people to go. There's nowhere left to run to. The answer to some is obvious, especially that of the settler movement and those media outlets very much on the side of Netanyahu's regime. And that is for Egypt to just open the crossing and let all these people through. Egypt know that to do that would be to take responsibility for all of these people, because Israel would almost certainly seal the crossing permanently to prevent any return. And we've heard settlers, especially at that recent settler conference I covered in another video, the likes of Nahala spokesperson Daniela Weiss, saying these people should be the rest of the world's problem. Send them to Britain, she said. And if Egypt wouldn't take responsibility, or sole responsibility, but would demand the UN step in, would demand other countries take some of these people on themselves, you can imagine how difficult to rehome nearly 2 million people would be. Those loyal Israeli media outlets, like the Jerusalem Post, for example, have run an article calling Egypt the Arab world's bad guy for not opening the crossing. In fact, there's video footage out there of Egypt reinforcing the border with Gaza, which is not a good look, and plays into that Israeli narrative, with them pointing at the desperation of the Gazan people attempting to bribe their way through to Egypt and saying, why won't you let them through? And of course, to those of us in the West or wherever else paying attention to some such things, we call the Post out for its utter shamelessness in this article, but then we aren't necessarily their intended audience, are we? That aside, though, these people are now more vulnerable than ever before. Rafah, they were told, was safe. That's where they should go. They should go there. And they did. And now they're getting killed there too. The hard-faced, hard-right Defence Minister Yoav Gallant has said, we will complete the mission and we'll continue to Rafah. We will continue to the end. There is no other way. In response to that, the Vice President of the humanitarian aid agency, the International Rescue Committee, IRC, a chap called Bob Kitchen, has said the scale of loss of life faced if Israel do so is huge. And that surely is obvious to anyone who has seen how Israel has been conducting itself up until now, because the videos showing the aftermath of their actions, thousands and thousands of videos now put out on social media over these last 4 months, should make that blatantly obvious, except to the most tin-eared and blinkered of Zionist sympathizers. Almost 9 out of 10 Gazans have been displaced, effectively everyone in Gaza except those who already lived in the far south of the Strip. Rafah itself has effectively doubled in size. Half of the city now is made up of people living in tents, having been displaced from elsewhere. Half of Rafah is a tent city. That's the UN estimate. The World Health Organization has now weighed in as well, and so the number of Gazans who are now dead, injured, or missing presumed dead has now topped 100,000. That's close to 5% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip before October 7th. According to UNICEF, there are now some 17,000 children in Gaza now unaccompanied or separated from their parents. Now, on the flip side, with the majority of people in the south of the Strip right on the border with Egypt, you might think the one plus here would be getting aid in would be a lot easier. There's far to go to reach people. Unfortunately, in practice, it isn't working out that way. For one, there are Israelis trying to blockade the aid from getting through at the Uga crossing, which is a crossing point between Egypt and Israel itself, which then goes on to Gaza. That is just plain evil. They've apparently succeeded in now closing that crossing. For another, as Israel have been laying waste to Khan Yunis, which is only about 7 miles north of Rafah, even more people have now fled further south. So what aid that was getting in, which was already insufficient, is now even more so. So apart from now being besieged by the Israeli military, the humanitarian crisis right on the Egyptian border is now worsening too. Disease is now rife. Queues to use the toilet are now apparently 4 to 5 hours long. The IRC suspect much of the diarrhea cases that they're now seeing is cholera. And now, just to add to it all, Friday night into Saturday, the Israeli military began targeting Rafah. Their initial targets, by the way, well, it was that tent city that is built up along with a kindergarten centre, which is also being used as a shelter now. More than 100 people have been killed in that first strike, which apparently lasted for 12 hours, mostly women and children again. And that is a rate that can only increase as more of Israel's military move further south. It is frankly terrifying right now to contemplate what we are now going to see over the next several days even. Promises of ceasefires have gone up in smoke. Even hostage exchange deals are falling through, mainly because of Netanyahu refusing to contemplate anything which risks his own grasp on power. He knows if this war ends, then so does his premiership now, as his coalition of far-right pro-settler seized Gaza types will collapse if he doesn't see this through. And such is the disgust of most right-thinking, horrified Israelis that they wouldn't touch Netanyahu again with a barge pole. So we won't do anything that'll end this peacefully, and no amount of foreign politicians going over there and begging and pleading with him to see sense will change that, because this isn't a man that's seeing sense. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, again, Mr. Pro-Israel, is supposedly heading out there this week to try and push for a new hostage deal. But frankly, he needs to get a grip, along with Genocide Joe and every other Western arms supplier government to the regime, and cut them off now, because without weaponry and armaments, they can't keep on killing. They get through the stuff too fast, which is exactly what they are going to do and are doing overnight last night. I'm writing this on Sunday morning, but in the last 5 hours, Israeli tanks have reportedly opened fire on East Rafah. Well, East Rafah is where all those tents have been set up. A genocide has been effectively live streamed to the world for the last 4 months. The world is more aware, appalled, and demanding something is done than ever before in the history of this ongoing conflict and issue and political mess that is the situation between Israel and Palestine. And where some countries, to their credit, are, by not defunding agencies like UNRWA, by increasing aid and funding to them, for others, this is just continuously falling on deaf ears. It is in their power to stop this, yet they don't. They won't. Their precious Israel project taking precedent, even as it shows itself to be the very worst of humanity now. What happens next, I genuinely fear for. But nobody can say they didn't see it coming, that they weren't aware, or call it a tragedy when they could have done more to prevent it. No one can do that. It isn't just Israel that needs putting on trial or holding to account for all of this. The entire world does, to one extent or another, and every single leader or potential political leader needs to be looked at, and it needs asking of them, what did you do? What did you say? And be judged on it. Because if genocides are supposed to be never again moments, they are right now allowing another to still continue, and none of us need leaders prepared to sit on their hands over that. In fact, if you need further emphasis of this point being made, more than 800 officials from 12 different countries, including the US, UK, Germany and France, have signed a statement warning that their governments are likely to be guilty of complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza. And in that vein, one question we'd all like an answer to right now, but we aren't getting, is why are Israeli planes flying in and out of the UK? What are they doing? Why are they all the way over here? And why won't anyone in the government, most of all, to the point, tell us? Haven't heard about this story? Well, that's the mainstream media for you. They don't report on such things. Do you think you ought to know about it? I certainly do. You better watch this video next then. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.